Well, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you, my friends, family, and followers. Hope everyone's doing great. I need to apologize. I've been slacking on this. Last week I had a sickness all week. And what I did, other than this past weekend, we were up north camping for a couple days, no internet reception or nothing. So there's really nothing. I'm way behind. But we're back on track and we're going to start chipping away. Today we are reading Ethiopian Bible. Bonus chapters from the original standard Bible that everybody reads. We haven't got there yet. We're on book 1, Genesis. Today we're going to be reading chapter 38, 39, 40, and 41. We're going to stop when we get to chapter 42, and that'll be for tomorrow. Sorry, let's take out my gum. I slightly forget exactly where we were at in the story because it's been a week. That's what happens when you miss. You forget a little bit. So that's my bad. My apologies. We'll just get going and hopefully it all comes back together. All right, book 1 of Genesis, chapter 38. Let's begin. At that time, Judah went down to his brothers and visited a certain Abulamite, whose name was Hira. There, Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite man named Shua. He took her and went into her. She conceived and bore a son, and he named him She conceived again and bore a son, and she named him Onan. She yet again bore a son, and named him Shelah. He was at Shezib when she bore him. Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. Judah's firstborn, was wicked in Yahweh's sight, so Yahweh killed him. Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her, and raise up offspring for your brother." Onan knew that the offspring wouldn't be his, and when he went into his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground, lest he should give offspring to his brother. The thing which he did was evil in Yahweh's sight, and he killed him also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house until Shelah, my son, is grown up." For he said, "Lest he also die like his brothers." Tamar went and lived in her father's house. After many days, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. Judah was comforted, and went up to his sheep shearers to Timnah. He and his friend Hira, the Adulamite. Tamar was told, "Behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." She took off the garments of her widowhood and covered herself with her veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in the gate of Enaim, which is on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she wasn't given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought that she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He turned to her by the way and said, "Please come, let me come into you." For he didn't know that she was the daughter-in-law, his daughter-in-law. Oh my gosh. She said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" He said, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." She said, "Will you give me a pledge until you send it?" He said, "What pledge will I give you?" She said, your signet and your cord and your staff that is your hand. He gave them to her, and he came into her, and she conceived by him. She arose and went away, and put off her veil from her, and put on the garments of her widowhood. Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend, the Abdulamite, to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, but he didn't find her. Then he asked the men of her place, saying, "Where is the prostitute that was at Enam by the road?" They said, "There has been no prostitute here." He returned to Judah and said, "I haven't found her." And also the men of the place said, "There has been no prostitute here." Judah said, "Let her keep it, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this young goat, and you haven't found her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the prostitute. Moreover, behold, she is with child by prostitution." Judah said, "Bring her out, and let her be burned." When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, "I am with child by the man who owns these." She also said, "Please discern whose these are, the signet, and the cords, and the staff." Judah acknowledged them and said, "She is more righteous than I, because I didn't give her to Shelah, my son." He knew her again no more. In the time of her travail, behold, twins were in her womb. When she travailed, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, "This come out first." As he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out, and she said, "Why have you made a breach for yourself?" There his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was Zerah. Sorry, summer allergies are starting. All right, that completes that chapter. Chapter 39. Joseph was brought down to Egypt. Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him from the hand of the Ishmaelites that had brought him down there. Yahweh was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw that Yahweh was with him, and that Yahweh made all that he did prosper in his hand. Joseph found favor in his sight. He ministered to him, and Potiphar made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. From the time that he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, Yahweh blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. Yahweh's blessing on all that he had in the house and in the field. He left all that he had in Joseph's hand. He didn't concern himself with anything except for the food which he ate. Joseph was well built and handsome. After these things, the master's wife set her eyes on Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused. And she said to his master's wife, "Behold, my master doesn't know what is with me in the house, and he has put all that he has in my hand. No one is greater in this house than I am, and he has not kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" As she spoke to Joseph day by day, he didn't listen to her, to lie by her, or to be with her. About this time he went into the house to do his work, and there were none of the men of the house inside. She caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." He left his garment in her hand and ran outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and he had run outside, she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, "Behold, he has brought a Hebrew into us to mock us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. When he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, he laid his garment by me and ran outside. She laid up his garment by her until his master came home. She spoke to him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant whom you have brought to us came into me to mock me. And as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment by me and ran outside. When his master heard the words of his wife, which he spoke to him, saying, This is what your servant did to me, his wrath was kindled. Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in custody. But Yahweh was with Joseph and showed kindness to him, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. The keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all that the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, he was responsible for it. The keeper of the prison didn't look after anything that was under his hand, because Yahweh was with him. And that which he did, Yahweh made it prosper. Okay. Chapter 40. After these things, the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker offended their lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. He put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he took care of them. They stayed in prison many days. They both dreamed a dream, each man his dream, in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were bound in the prison. Joseph came into them in the morning and saw them, and saw that they were sad. He asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, saying, Why do you look so sad today? They said to him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. Joseph said to them, Don't interpretations belong to God? Please tell it to me. The chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was in front of me, and in the vine we were 3 branches. It was as though it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Joseph said to him, This is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up his head and restore you to your office. You will give Pharaoh's cup into his hand, the way you did when you were his cupbearer. But remember me when it is well with you. Please show kindness to me and make mention of me to Pharaoh, and bring me out of his house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into this dungeon. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, 3 baskets of white bread were on my head. In the uppermost basket there were all kinds of baked food for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. Joseph answered, This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from off you and will hang you in a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from off you. On the 3rd day, which Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer didn't remember Joseph, but forgot him. Wow, that was kind of intense. Hung so the birds can eat your flesh. Ooh. All right, chapter 41. What's our time? 17 minutes. All right, we got good time going here. I try to keep these under 30. 30 minutes a day to study the Bible. Can't go wrong. All right, chapter 41. At the end of 2 full years, Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. Behold, 7 cattle came up out the river. They were sleek and fat, and they fed in the marsh grass. Behold, 7 other cattle came up after them out of the river, ugly and thin, and stood by the other cattle on the brink of the river. The ugly and thin cattle ate up the 7 sleek and fat cattle. So Pharaoh awoke, he slept and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 heads of grain came up on one stalk, healthy and good. Behold, 7 heads of grain, thin and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy and full ears. Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Excuse me. In the morning, his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all of Egypt's magicians and wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I remember my faults today. Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me in custody in the house of the captain of the guard with the chief baker. We dreamed a dream, and one night, he and I, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, there was with us There was with us there a young man, a Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. He interpreted to each man according to his dream, as he interpreted to us, so it was. He restored me to my office, and he hanged me. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. He shaved himself, changed his clothing, and came into Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there was no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It isn't in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood on the brink of the river, and behold, 7 fat and sleek cattle came up out of the river. They fed in the marsh grass, and behold, 7 other cattle came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for ugliness. The thin and ugly cattle ate up the first 7 fat cattle, and when they had eaten them up, it couldn't be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ugly as at the beginning. So I awoke. I saw my dream, and behold, 7 heads of grain came up on the stalk, full of good, and behold, 7 heads of grain, withered, thin, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads of grain. I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. Joseph said to Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. What God is about to do, he has declared to Pharaoh. The 7 good cattle are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. The dream is one. The 7 thin and ugly cattle that came up after them are 7 years, and are also 7 empty heads of grain blasted with the east wind. They will be 7 years of famine. That is the thing which I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Behold, 7 years of great plenty throughout all of the land of Egypt are coming. 7 years of famine will arise after them, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will not be known in the land by reason of that famine which follows, for it will be very grievous. The dream was doubled to Pharaoh because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look for a discreet and wise man, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint overseers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt's produce in the 7 plenteous years. Let them gather all the food of these good years that come, and store grain under the hand of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. The food will be to supply the land against 7 years of famine, which will be had in the land of Egypt, so that the land will not perish through the famine. The thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. Pharaoh said to his servants, Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Pharaoh said to Joseph, Because God has shown you all of this, there is no one so discreet and wise as you. You shall be over my house. All my people will be ruled according to your word. Only in the throne I will be greater than you. Pharaoh said to Joseph, Behold, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in robes of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. He made him ride in the 2nd chariot which he had. They cried before him, Bow the knee. He set him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh. Without you, no man shall lift up his hand or his foot in all that land of Egypt. Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphenath Paneah. He gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, as a wife. Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. In the 7 plenteous years the earth produced abundantly. He gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt and laid up the food in the cities. He stored food in each city from the fields around the city. Joseph laid up grain as the sand of the sea, very much, until he stopped counting, for it was without number. To Joseph were born 2 sons before the year of famine came, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh, for, he said, God has made me forget all my toil and all of my father's house. The name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of plenty that were in the land of Egypt came to an end. The 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph. What he says to you, do." The famine was over all of the surface of the earth. Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. The famine was severe in the land of Egypt. All countries came into Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe in all the earth. Interesting. And that completes chapter 41. All right. Well, that was a good day of reading. I want to thank you all for joining along. I don't know if you're reading with me, like if you got your own book and you're kind of reading along, if you've got me on in the background, and just kind of listening like an audiobook. I don't know, but I appreciate it. And thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day.